Okay. All right, so it looks like our acting chair can kick off the meeting.
Okay, hold on a second here. So welcome to the May meeting of the Park and Rec Commission. Our first step is we're going to do a roll call vote, and Becky, could you do that, please?
Yes, Commissioner Cabrales,
Here.
Commissioner Emerson,
Here?
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Here.
Commissioner Lauman. She is absent. Chair Machado will also be absent this evening, as well as Commissioner Reisinger. She'll be absent. And Commissioner Sandoval.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Since we don't have any public on the call, do we still need to go through the motions for public comment for the record, Susan?
At this point, we're just going to agenda amendments first.
Okay, that sounds good. Any amendments? The first item on the agenda is to review the agenda. Any amendments to it?
There are none.
Okay. The next item will be the minutes. We want to take a look at the minutes and call for approval. Any questions about the minutes at this point? Okay. So before we approve the minutes, we would go to public comment, but since there are no public, I think we can go straight to a roll call vote. Becky, if you could do the vote, please.
First, we're going to need a motion to accept and approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
And a second?
Oh, sorry. I second. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Kayla.
Uh-huh.
All right. So, Commissioner Cabrales,
Yes.
Commissioner Emerson,
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I've got an unstable connection, so I might be shorting out.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez, great. And Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So the next item on the agenda would be, let's see, public introductions, awards, recognitions, announcements. Anything from any of these members?
We have none.
Okay. And again, since there's no public, we can skip the public comment. And so the next item is the most important item on the agenda, I think, which is the proposed update to the city's park and recreation childcare fees. And I believe that Catherine has a presentation about the fees and the proposal. So Catherine, if you want to just take it away. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen here. Give me 1 second to pull up the PowerPoint. All right, so this is the moment. Oh, let me get it on presentation mode. All right, so this is the moment we've all been waiting for. I know we've kind of had a lot of preparation for this. In the fall, we had a presentation where we kind of went over our current fee structure. We talked about some of the challenges and areas where we might want to make adjustments. And now we're ready to bring to you the staff's recommendations for a comprehensive recreation and childcare fee update. So it's just kind of a quick reminder on the background of the proposed update. The city had its last comprehensive fee update in 2011. This was the last time that most of the city's recreation fees are updated. The exceptions to that is the childcare fees have been updated more recently. Those were last updated in 2017. And the Borough Community Center commercial rental fees were updated in 2014. But other than that, 2011 was the last time any of the recreation fees were updated. Prior to 2011, the city actually was on a schedule of updating its fees every 1 to 2 years. And I think that's kind of going to be the goal for the city moving forward. I think we've seen that that's kind of an easier process to keep going. And it results in kind of more incremental changes versus now we're coming to you and presenting quite a lot of both structural and numeric changes. So over the past 18 months, the city's been working with a fee consultant to conduct a comprehensive analysis of all city fees. And this library and recreation fees are going to be the first out of the gate and the first that are going to be brought forward to City Council for approval. So that's why we're all here tonight. And as part of this fee update process, the city had a couple of overarching goals for the recreation and childcare update. First, we wanted to ensure that the fees are supportive of current programming. As you can imagine, over the past decade, our programs and services have changed. So one goal is to make sure that the fee structure really matches the current service offerings and the use patterns that we're seeing now in 2021. Second, we also want to make sure that the fees align internally. Over the years, as programs and facilities change, sometimes the fees get a little out of whack. So something that costs X at one facility might cost Y at another. So in this update, we really are trying to look at this holistically and to make sure that our fees, we're charging the similar amounts for similar services internally. A third goal with this is to improve our cost recovery rates. So the fee consultants we were working with shared with us that most recreation departments strive for about 50% cost recovery. And I'm going to share more data on our current cost recovery and kind of the predicted impacts of these updates as we get later on in the conversation. That said, while cost recovery is important, recreation fees are actually a little bit different than other city user fees. Most city user fees are calculated based solely on cost recovery. So for example, a building permit is calculated based on the amount of time that it takes staff to process it. However, for recreation fees, those are largely set based off of market rates, not as much based off of cost recovery, although that's still important. And that approach was kind of codified into law by Prop 26, which kind of sets that standard that recreation fees are allowed to be set based on market rates. So that brings me to the last goal for the update, which is to align our fees with market rates. As part of this process, we conducted a thorough review of neighboring agencies' current rates. And much of that data is provided in the staff report. I pulled out a few key items that I'll touch on in this presentation, but if you want more on some of the kind of the comparison fees, there's more detail on that in the staff report. So as we conducted this analysis, we realized that in most areas we'd fallen slightly behind market and needed to make relatively small adjustments to catch up. However, there are some areas where we found we've really fallen pretty significantly behind market and are making more substantive recommendations for increases. And there were even a couple, not many, but a couple areas where we found we were above market rates, and we've recommended adjusting those rates as well. So the final fee recommendations are really based on this goal of kind of aligning ourselves within the market. So I told you I would talk about cost recovery. So these are kind of our current cost recovery rates. And there's a lot of detail on this slide, but the things that are the most important numbers are these ones in yellow, highlighted in yellow and red. So what this is showing us is that currently our recreation programs recover about 44% of their costs, while our childcare programs recover about 97% of their costs, for a total overall division recovery rate of 74%. But it's really kind of that 44 and 97 that we're looking at. So as I mentioned before, our consultants advised us that for the recreation the recreation programs, 50% cost recovery is a fairly standard target. On the flip side, for our childcare programs, that program has always had a goal of recovering more than 100% of their costs. So the reason we shoot for over 100% is to put money aside for capital improvements to keep the buildings and the modulars kind of up to date. Those modulars every once in a while need to be replaced. And the childcare program funds those replacements on its own. One point to note before we move away from this slide, I did just want to say that the expenditures include both direct program costs as well as division overhead. So this includes staff time for coordinators, supervisors, administrative staff, myself and Susan. So sometimes when folks talk about cost recovery, they're just looking at the direct program costs, and actually I do that a little bit later, but this is looking at kind of inclusive of that division overhead. At the same time, it doesn't include the city overhead of HR and finance and things like that. But so the kind of takeaway here is that both in recreation and childcare, you know, there's some improvements we'd like to make in terms of our cost recovery goals. All right, so now I'm going to walk us through some of the larger changes that are being proposed. I want to note that we are proposing some level of change on virtually every fee, but we would be here all night if I walked through each and every fee. So for this presentation, I'm going to focus on those that either have proposed structural changes or have a significant fee increase that's being proposed, or in a couple of cases, both. And the current and proposed fee schedules are included in as attachments to the staff report if you would like to look through each fee in more detail. All right, so to start with the community centers, I'm going to start first with the Borough Community Center. So historically, the Borough Community Center rates have been set at 50% of the rates at the San Rafael Community Center. And City Council established the fees in this way to ensure that the facility would be accessible and affordable to the surrounding Canal community. As I mentioned earlier, in 2014, the fees for the commercial rates were actually raised to be at 75% of the San Rafael Community Center fees. And in this update, staff is actually recommending we go a little bit farther than that. So staff is proposing that we keep the 50% discount for nonprofit renters and for private resident renters, but that non-resident private renters and commercial renters actually pay the full fee that they would pay similar to what they would pay at the San Rafael Community Center. Staff feel that this is really in keeping with City Council's original intent of keeping the rates affordable for the local community, that residents could still have their events there for a heavily discounted rate. Nonprofits could still put on their events there as well. But that we would be reducing the city's subsidies to folks coming in from out of the area for their weddings and special events and the commercial activities going on at the center. And one other thing to note about this is that the Borough Community Center also does have a very robust fee waiver co-sponsorship program for any nonprofits that are putting on free programming for the community. So that would still remain in place. So there's a lot of ways that we're making sure that the Borough Community Center is still accessible. Second, at the community center, we realized that currently the gymnasium is set based on auditorium fee rates. And when we looked at other agencies, we noticed that gymnasiums typically are set at a much lower rate than auditoriums. So we're actually recommending that we split the gymnasium fee out away from the auditorium fee and establish a fee for the gymnasium that's more in line with market rates and still affordable. So at San Rafael and Terra Linda Community Center, the primary change that staff is recommending is that we eliminate the multi-room discount. And doing the market analysis, we found that this really isn't industry standard. We didn't find any other agencies that offered a multi-room discount. And additionally, that discount is also not offered currently at the Borough Community Center. Then the last kind of somewhat significant change we're recommending is this is one of those areas where over the years, there kind of became a misalignment in fees. So currently the classrooms at San Rafael and Terra Linda are the same size, offer relatively the same amenities, but the fees at Terra Linda are lower than those at San Rafael. So we're recommending that we bring those two back in alignment and set the fees at San Rafael and Terra Linda at the same rate. Okay, so now the Falkirk Cultural Center. This is an area where we're probably recommending some of the most substantial changes. When we looked at other facilities, other mansions that are used primarily as special event venues, it was a little hard to find, but we found some. We really realized that our current rates are far below market. Additionally, our fee structure was pretty significantly different from what anyone else in the market was offering. So as a result, staff are recommending a number of kind of structural changes. First, we're recommending that we establish block rates and rental hour minimums. What we're recommending is a 2-hour minimum Monday through Thursday, a 6-hour block on Friday and Sunday, and a 10-hour block on Saturday. This is more or less in alignment with what other agencies do with these types of facilities. I think we're a little bit on the conservative side. A lot of them say you have to book for a 12-hour block. We want it to be a little bit more flexible than that. Folks can add hours on if they would like to. But this is to really ensure that kind of we're maximizing the rental time that's being utilized at the Falkirk Cultural Center, particularly on the really popular, Saturdays as well as Fridays and Sundays. Second, currently Falkirk offers a really heavily discounted rate for long-term rentals, which is considered a group that rents more than 6 times a year. This is not a discount that we offer at any other facility within the city, nor is it offered by any of our competitors. And it really creates another one of those misalignments within our city fees. So basically, for the same rate, someone can book the entire Falkirk Cultural Center as they would pay to book a single classroom at the San Rafael Community Center. So internally, that just didn't quite make sense and didn't quite seem fair. So staff are recommending that the city eliminate the long-term rental discount and just establish an hourly rate that's consistent, whether it's a one-off renter or a multi-use renter. Additionally, staff are recommending that we add a non-resident and commercial rates at Falkirk. Currently, they are not established, and that is something that we have at all other facilities. We're also recommending that we eliminate kind of the summer-winter pricing. That's just not something we've seen at other agencies, and it seems kind of an unnecessary complication of the fees. One thing to note about Falkirk when we're looking at some of these rather substantial changes, because we are also, in addition to these structural changes, recommending a pretty substantial increase in the fees themselves. That Falkirk is really primarily used as a wedding venue and for kind of one-off private rentals. In 2019, 73% of the rentals were private rentals, and 71% of the rentals were non-residents. So it's a lot of folks coming in from San Francisco, from other areas around the Bay, to hold these one-off special events. All right, so aquatics is another area where we're recommending some structural changes, particularly that relate to the season passes. So the first recommended change is changing the season pass length. So currently our season pass is from April through September, and staff is recommending that be changed to Memorial Day through Labor Day. One thing I want to be really clear about is that we're not saying that we're going to be opening the pool for less time. What we're just saying is that this is the season pass length. The pool would still be open the same length. It would open sometime in March or April, continue through October or so. But on those kind of shoulder seasons, folks would use a drop-in or punch pass. And one of the reasons that we're doing this is that this will give the city more of an ability to evaluate kind of the financial feasibility of remaining open longer in those shoulder seasons. We'll be able to better gauge usage, as well as kind of the cost and the revenue that's generated in those shoulder seasons. And that's something that we've heard from a lot of our swimmers, that they really would love for us to be open longer. And we hope that this kind of gives us the ability to better evaluate that as an option. Additionally, the scheduling in those shoulder kind of spring and fall seasons tends to be more variable due to maintenance, due to weather, smoke, and staffing challenges. we found that in kind of March through May and September through October, we really can't guarantee the kind of robust scheduling that we provide in summer months. So we've heard from a number of pool pass holders that the value of their pass is actually diminished when our days and times are reduced in these spring and fall months. So to address this, we feel like reducing the season pass length from Memorial Day through Labor Day, when we can really ensure that the pool is fully open, will also ensure that pass holders receive the full value of their season pass. The second structural change we're recommending for the pool pass is to reduce the number of season passes. Currently, we offer 16 different types of passes, and we're recommending that we reduce that to 3, an adult, a youth, and a senior pass. Currently, we offer discounts based on family size and marital status, and given kind of the diversity of family type and life choices, many agencies are moving away from these kind of family size based discounts. And the city is recommending that we do the same. And finally, we're including a number of fees in this schedule that are kind of already in use, but haven't been formally adopted because it's been so long since we've done this sort of update. So that's the swim lessons, the picnic rentals, pool rentals, lane rentals, things like that. So as the pools are a really popular option, I did want to touch specifically on the pool pass rates. We are recommending increasing them slightly. On the left-hand side, you can see our current rates. The box in red is the proposed rates, and then we've got the rates for Marinwood and Mill Valley. And so what staff has initially recommended is to align our rates with those of Marinwood. I did want to note, and I'll be talking about this a little bit kind of later on in the presentation when I talk about our stakeholder engagement, but one of the points of feedback that we got from stakeholders thus far is that they actually would like to see the non-resident rates raised more than what staff is proposing. And because as you can see here, the non-resident rate is remaining the same, largely because we had a greater differential than some of the other agencies. But staff would be open to raising the non-resident rate to 10 and 8. And we'd be curious to hear kind of input from the commission on that. Next is the athletic fields, the parks, and the picnic areas. So currently the city has 4 different athletic fields that are pretty different in size and with different amenities, but we only have one adopted field fee, which is based really on Albert Park. So we've also got Bernard Hoffman and Victor Jones, which are much smaller, as well as Picoweed, which is a soccer field with a completely different kind of amenities there. So staff are recommending that we establish a fee for each of these different athletic fields based on their size and the amenities offered. Additionally, we're recommending for picnic rentals, we currently offer a daily rate where we found most surrounding agencies you have an hourly rate for picnic rentals. So we're recommending we transition from a daily to an hourly rate. We're also recommending that we establish fees for grassy areas, blacktops, and for full park special event rentals. Currently, we only have a fee established for our picnic areas. And throughout, as we were kind of developing these fee recommendations, one of the key things in our mind was still to make sure that the amenities at Picoweed area, the picnic rentals and the fields remained affordable for the community. All right, so the community gardens. The gardens are another area where we discovered there was a pretty significant internal discrepancy in our fees. So currently the city has 2 community gardens, one in Terra Linda and one in the Canal. Currently the 2 gardens have virtually the same plot fees. I think there may be $1 of difference. However, the Terra Linda garden plots are 9 times the size of the Canal community garden plot. So the Terra Linda plots are 450 square feet and the Canal garden plots are 50 square feet. At the same time, the Canal garden is newer. It has kind of more well-developed amenities and is just in a little bit nicer shape. That said, making sure that the rates felt appropriate given these differences in size and amenities was an important goal for staff when looking at our recommendation here. Additionally, staff also realized that the two gardens have very different cost recovery rates. And developing the proposed fees, we were really trying to make sure there was more equity in terms of cost recovery of these two gardens. So as a result of those kind of considerations, staff are recommending a substantial increase to the Terra Linda plot fees and a small increase to the canal fees. As you can see, so on the left-hand side, we've got our current Canal and Terra Linda fees, and the red box is the proposed fees, and on the right are the fees, kind of comparison fees for Larkspur and Pleasanton. And we've got kind of the square footage, the plot fee recommendation, and the fee per what that calculation would be per square foot. So as you can see with this table, even with kind of the substantial increase for the Terra Linda and the more modest increase for the canal, when you look at per square foot, the canal would be $1.50 and Terra Linda would be 30 cents. So the canal still really is paying for those newer amenities, kind of the the fact that it's a more developed area, even with this kind of different these different increases. Additionally, if you look at the per square foot fee for Terra Linda compared to, say, Larkspur or Pleasanton, we see that Terra Linda is still very affordable and is on the lower end of the spectrum. So, you know, as such, staff did feel that this is a fair proposal. I did also mention the cost recovery rates earlier, and I wanted to share a little bit more detail there. So the top table is the current fees and the cost recovery for the canal versus Terra Linda with the current fees, and the bottom table is the proposed fees. So from this table, we can see that the canal currently recovers over 100% of its direct non-personnel expenses, while Terra Linda recovers approximately 50%. So the proposed changes reduce this differential drastically. Although the canal cost recovery is still a bit higher than the Terra Linda, they're much closer in line with each other. I do also want to emphasize here that the cost recovery calculation here is for direct non-personnel expenses only. So it's water, it's repairs to fences and water lines, it's wheelbarrows and hoses and supplies. It does not include staff time, not even direct staff time to manage the garden. So I just want to point that out, because if we're seeing here 100% cost recovery, and then we're talking later about a goal of 50% cost recovery. If we actually included the staff time and the overhead, our community gardens are our most heavily subsidized program. So I just want to make sure that folks aren't thinking we're expecting the gardens to recover 100% where everyone else only has to do 50. The gardens are actually very heavily subsidized by the city. So the next slide is banners, and this is a program that the Recreation Division took over in the past couple of years. It used to be run by the Economic Development Department, and I included in this presentation mainly, we're not recommending any structural changes, but we are recommending a substantial increase to the fees. So historically, the city contracted with an outside contractor to hang the banners. And the currently established fees covered pretty significantly less than half of what the contractor charged us to hang them. So luckily, just this past month, Public Works got a bucket truck. And so we're actually going to be taking this service in-house, which does reduce the cost to the city of putting up these fees. However, we did look at the cost of staff time that putting up these banners cost the city, and it is still pretty significantly more than what is currently charged. So the proposed fees cover the estimated time that Public Works staff will spend in hanging the banners. It's important to note that this will not include our department staff time administering the program, but we did feel it was going to be a pretty substantial increase, and that at least covering the costs of installing the banners was a good start. So childcare fees, as I mentioned, were last increased in 2017, so they're not too far out of line with market. I mainly wanted to bring this up in this presentation, not necessarily because we're changing structure or proposing a radical increase, but mainly just because this is a large program that serves a lot of members of the community. So I wanted to make sure to touch on it. And really the kind of bottom line proposal is that for after school fees, we're recommending a 5% across the board increase, and for preschool fees, we're recommending a 10% increase. The differential between preschool and after school programs is a couple of reasons. One, our preschool program rates were farther behind the market than our after school program rates. And additionally, our preschool program has a lower cost recovery rate than our after school programs. So again, this is fairly modest and increases and in line with the rates that we're seeing from neighboring agencies. Okay, so those are the changes. And now it's interesting to look at, with all of these proposed changes, where does that get us in terms of cost recovery? So I'm putting up this is our current cost recovery, just as a reminder: 44% recreation, 97% childcare. And here's what we are predicting the cost recovery would be with all of these changes. It's with so many structural changes, it's a little bit challenging to predict exactly what the increases are going to be in certain areas, but this is staff's best estimate. And so where this gets us in recreation, we move from a 44% cost recovery to 52%. And in childcare, it gets us over that 100% target. So we will be able to start growing our capital improvement funds. So in recreation, it gets us kind of to that, 50% that the consultants told us was pretty standard. And it gets us over the 100% target in childcare. So it's just interesting to note with, I just spent, I don't know how many, 15, 20 minutes going over all of the fee changes. And it's really still a somewhat moderate increase to our cost recovery, despite all of these large changes. All right, so I did want to just share a little bit with the commission about what stakeholder engagement we've already done, because there's a lot of changes, and we wanted to make sure that our community both was aware of what was being proposed and had an opportunity to provide input. So in late April, we reached out to specific stakeholder groups and invited them to participate in a series of meetings, which were held in the first week of May. We held meetings for 4 stakeholder groups, which were pool pass holders, community gardeners, our field renters, and our ongoing facility renters. All of these groups also received notification about this commission meeting and about the opportunity that they would have to provide input here. Additionally, the proposed fees have been shared with all of our families in the child care program. As we've been putting out kind of our registrations for fall, our child care directors have been sharing the proposed rates with families as well. So what did we hear from the community? I will say attendance at the meetings was somewhat limited. We got a decent number of folks register for the meetings. Fewer people actually attend, but we did get some feedback. Overall, most people felt that the increases were fair and made sense. They understood that the city, can't go 10 years without raising their fees, and that this was kind of long overdue. I think we shared with you earlier today a public comment from one of our ongoing renters that expressed largely a similar sentiment. As I mentioned earlier, I think the one specific point of feedback we got from folks was a couple of the swimmers felt that we hadn't increased our non-resident aquatics fees enough. And then from the childcare families, we've really just only kind of gotten appreciation back that the rates are going to remain affordable. I think partly coming out of COVID, where we did have to increase our rates substantially because of the lower capacities and this more stringent requirements. that going back to something that feels closer to normal, folks are appreciative of that. So for the next steps, after we have this discussion with the commission, we're going to be taking the plan at this point is we're on the schedule for the July 6th city council meeting. And if it's approved by city council, then we'll begin communicating this with stakeholders and implementing these changes. Staff is recommending sort of a stepwise implementation schedule based on the specific program and kind of the seasonality and structure of it. So for certain programs, we would just recommend implementing them immediately. That's the banner program, the facility rentals, the picnic and park rentals, and the tennis courts. So those are areas where they're not necessarily very seasonal. And anyone that we've already been in negotiations with, we would kind of honor the originally quoted price, but anyone new coming in would be, we'd be using the new prices moving forward. For childcare, we would recommend that this be implemented with the school year. That's what we've already started communicating out to families as a possibility. And then for aquatics, fields and gardens, that's where we would recommend starting in 2022. So the gardens are on an annual cycle. At the next annual kind of renewal, we'd have them implement that. The fields also get booked out at the beginning of the season for the full year. So though they're already booked, we're already in contracts with folks for that. Aquatics, I've got an asterisk here because currently we are using an adjusted COVID rate because we're still limiting our pool capacity pretty significantly. If we were to be able to relax that, I think we're all waiting to see what happens on June 15th. If we're able to get up to a slightly more normal capacity in our pools, I think we would recommend actually implementing this sooner rather than going back to the old rates and then back to the new rates, just going from the COVID rates to these rates. Because also we're already at a point where the season pass is really not, we're going to be past the season pass time. So it will really just be drop-ins as the option for folks. All right, so that was a lot of talking. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and it's up for you guys to ask comments and questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Catherine?
I have a couple questions. Why bother increasing the canal garden rates? It seems really small, and since the at least at Alboro, the intent is to really serve the community. Why and the cost recovery isn't there, but the cost per square foot's really high when comparing to other communities? Why wouldn't we just leave that? Is it, I don't know. That was just struck me as interesting.
I mean, Susan, do you,
I was going to say, I'm going to just jump in here because Catherine has been talking for a while and I want to give her a break to breathe. But she probably has a better answer. But I'll share with you kind of my thought. So we do have people who participate in the Canal Garden from all over the community. So I know that the Borough Community Center and Picoweed Park are open to the community, but honestly, the majority of participation at that site, Canal area, the Canal Garden is quite different. We do have people from all over the community that are participating in it because there's a huge waiting list, especially at the Terra Linda Community Garden. Part of the reason of raising it, you raise a really good point, is equity in that fees are being adjusted across the board. And so we just wanted to do really an incremental change without it being a significant impact for the reasons you just explained, which is the community garden plots at Terra Linda are 9 times the size. I mean, it's crazy. And they're basically being charged the same. So there's a lack of equity there. But again, either you keep the fees similar to what they are at Terra Linda and you dramatically reduce the fees at Canal Garden in relationship to the size, but then we'd lose the cost recovery there. But again, we're waiting for your feedback on some of these. And if you felt like, you know what, it's not even worth doing, don't make those adjustments, that would be our recommendation. We will take that forward to the city council for their consideration.
Well, I think it's important to know that it's not just community participants. Do you ever get feedback that the cost is prohibiting community participants?
No, we actually, in the meeting that we had with the gardeners, we had 2 Canal community gardeners and they both said, wow, that's a really reasonable increase. So they were pretty thrilled. They said, hey, do you
Great.
want us to come and say how excited we are at the commission meeting? And we're like, if you want to, but.
What was also interesting is the city took over the operations of the Canal Garden in 2017. There was a nonprofit organization that had oversight. And so when we took it over, we basically charged the same that was at Terra Linda. That's why that misalignment. But what we didn't know was something that they shared with us at the stakeholders meeting, which was we used to get charged more. So they're really happy that this is all
Great.
that's charged them. So
That sounds great. Thank you. And my other question was at Falkirk, why not charge more if most of the people are non-residents? Is there room in the market for that? If the cost recovery is really, I actually don't remember that point, if the cost recovery is good on those Falkirk, but if it's mostly non-resident, is there a reason not to raise it more?
I think we'll see. I think we were a little hesitant to raise it too much because we wanted to see what the market would bear. Falkirk is slightly smaller than many of the other places we were able to look at. So Falkirk's got about a 125 capacity, where some of the other ones were more like, 150 to 200. So, we did feel that Falkirk, the service provided was probably a little bit lower than at these other places. So we wanted to just see.
Sure.
But I think that is something we'll keep in mind moving forward. And if there is the appetite in the market there for the current increase, and we don't lose,
Right.
reservations, then that could be an area where we might look at more substantive increases.
Falkirk was one of the most difficult situations to really write, kind of writing the ship. And the reason for that is, as Catherine mentioned earlier on, we were charging for an hour's use as if it was a room. So to give you an idea, we had a rental fee of $30 per hour on the books. We didn't have 2 categories on the books. So you can imagine a couple of things that happened as we were doing the market study and realizing what these other mansions of comparable size and amenities were offering. To bring it into alignment, in some cases, were tripling, and then requiring a minimum amount of hours to go from a single hour to 2 during the week, or multiple hours on Friday, Sunday, and Saturday. So it was just a huge dramatic change that we were trying to, so we're still the lowest of all the mansions, but we are more, I know that doesn't sound funny. We're the most affordable option of the mansions. And Dunsmore is about the smallest one. But again, when we look at capacity at 125 is really throughout the mansion and going outdoors. And many of these mansions or these formal settings, they're able to accommodate that all in one space. So it's,
different. Thank you. I had one other question on the comment that you guys should increase the non-resident swim fees more. How many non-resident people are using it? Is it like Novato or like way non-resident? Is there an actual volume of people that would affect?
A lot of folks, not so much lap swimmers, although I do think we get lap swimmers from Novato or Corte Madera, kind of surrounding communities. But we also get a lot of rec swimmers coming in from San Francisco, which, Ariel, I'm sure you're, I know when I used to work at the Racket Club, we got a lot of that too.
Show up in their fleece.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I would agree with them. I support raising that. Thank you, guys.
Okay, is there anybody else that has any questions or comments? We're such a small group today. I'm just, go ahead, Commissioner Cabrales.
Thank you. Yeah, I was concerned about the picnic spots being changed from daily to hourly, only thinking about my own personal experiences, like who's gonna kick out the other people that were there before you, or I feel like that could make really uncomfortable and confrontational at some points
So Susan,
situations.
correct me if I'm wrong, but we would still only rent out to one party a day.
Right.
The goal with the
Okay.
hourly is not necessarily to try and shove like 3 parties in.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah, because we do recognize that we're not going to be sending out a park attendant at the start and at the end to make sure they're not overstaying their hours. So, there is a bit of a honor code there, but we also recognize that, and that is also, there was a 3-hour minimum that we're gonna kind of require, just recognizing like, you're not gonna come and have a 1-hour party. You're probably just booking the park. And we really set the fees kind of trying to equate like about 3 hours of a rental to the daily rate, because we felt that was probably the average party length that someone's going out there for.
Again,
It's mostly youth birthday parties, things like that.
again, we aligned it with market and how the market, a lot of times when we get clients, right, and people want to rent picnic areas that are either community-based or non-residents, they're calling up Mill Valley, they're going to Corte Madera, they're, Larkspur, and they're coming to us and they're comparing fees. And our fees were one price for a day and they were quoting hourly fees. So that was number one, kind of the reason to make it a lot simpler. And also the other thing that we aligned, again, Catherine mentioned, in some cases, our fees are aligned, but the amenities are extremely different. Fields, community gardens, and picnics were one of them. And so what we try to do is go in there and we literally send staff out to count how many tables and how many people can fit in each one, because you can imagine paying, let's say, X amount per dollar per hour for a large picnic area versus one that has 2 tables. You shouldn't be paying the same. It's a different amenity. So there was a lot of thought that went into that. And then once we knew the sizes of them, we reached out to those communities and said, what are you charging for something a picnic area that can accommodate X versus 20 people or 12?
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sandoval, do you have some comments, questions?
No questions. My comment is Commissioner Gutierrez had the same questions as me, so I appreciate the explanation. Thanks.
I do want to share one thing with you. You haven't asked, but I assume that you've read your staff report and you guys just know all this stuff off the top of your head really well. It doesn't include classes. So a lot of times when you talk about raising fees, the community goes, oh, that poor child who's taking, that is participating in camp, or the senior who's participating in Tai Chi or watercolor. What are you doing? None of those fees, as you can see, are being impacted here. Those are offered through contractors, right? And those contractors set their own fees with our input. And so they're not part of the city's fee schedule. So really what we are talking about here is, our services that the city provides, like Aquatics, but a lot of it is all rentals, right? It's the use of our fields, picnic areas, rooms, and pool. Pool is really the only thing that we offer that's really staff-led besides childcare. We have some one-offs, but that's the majority of them. And we will be coming back to you next month to talk, I believe next month, to talk about our scholarship program, because that's usually, as you're talking about fees, the first part is really, once you understand kind of the groundwork, the second part that usually comes up is, okay, what are we going to do to help the community fill that gap for affordability if they want to do something? So we will be coming back to you with the scholarship program and recommendations for revising what currently is in practice.
I did have one more question, actually. I know we said we were going to try to revisit the fees, on an annual or every 2 years. Is there anything we need to do to make sure that that happens, or as a commission?
You could, as part of your recommendation, because what we're asking you tonight is, once you are finished, if you feel comfortable making a motion to accept the report and provide the following comments. So the comment could be that we really encourage the city to continue to do this process on an annual or biannual basis. So,
Great.
or, like Commissioner Gutierrez said, we really would like you to consider the non-resident rates and raising those a little bit higher in Aquatics. If you want us to adjust the Canal Garden, any of that feedback, whatever you provide tonight, we're going to take forward. So we really want to make sure when you go to make the motion that we get all the comments that you feel comfortable in forwarding to the city council for their consideration.
Got it. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Susan, to your point about the programs, I did notice on the report, the staff report, I didn't memorize it, but you reminded me that I think this is what I'm looking at on page 3 of the staff report. There's a contract classes, camps, workshops, programs, and the cost recovery is 47%. Does that mean that all those programs, or I should say the contracted fees that you negotiate with the providers, shouldn't those be higher, or is this just sort of another market rate situation?
Because the way that it works with contract instructors is that they propose the rate, and we can either say yes or no. And then they get a certain percentage of it, somewhere usually between 60 to 70%, and the city gets 20 to 30%. The reason, so it does cover all of its direct costs and more, but it's the department
It's the
overhead.
overhead. Okay.
That 20 to 30% doesn't make that big of a dent in the department
Yeah.
overhead and the
Okay.
management of it. Yeah.
Yeah, the goal, if your contract classes aren't recovering 100% of your direct costs, something's really wrong, right? But the city and our consultants have kind of lumped direct costs as anything in the department on down to delivering that program. And in some agencies, often that reference of direct costs is really just program specific. Like in aquatics would be, it's the lifeguards, the swim instructors, and anything to do with the pool. It wouldn't include our supervisor's time or the activities guide or the registration cost or anything like that. Here, all those costs are associated with it. So it does kind of throw you when you're looking at, wait a minute, why, if it's contractual, it should be at 100%. Well, its direct costs are.
And I also think that they changed just recently that the percentage that the city was taking from the contractual, it used to be that it was, I forget, 70-30, and now it's 60-40 or something like that. I think that there was an overhaul for at least the after school contractual teachers in the last year or two as well. So that probably is reflected in those numbers, I would guess. But I would say that I do wonder how much of that will happen for the after school programs, only because that was something that I used to be in teaching. I was one of those contractual workers, and I have to say that with the schools not allowing anybody to do specialists to come into the classroom, that I wonder how much of that after school programming will actually happen in the next year or two.
Yeah, you raised a really good point. You know, the contractual rates that we implemented a couple of years ago, we did a similar survey of what other agencies, what the rates are, kind of the revenue share with contractors for the different amenities and what the exemptions are. So like, you know, if a contractor uses a city facility and does all the work here, what's the revenue share versus using their own? I mean, there are places that have martial arts studios and those cities contract with them to do their programs at their site. So the percentage is a little different. But Commissioner Cabrales, you bring up a really good point. We've already seen that with our camps. The normal youth enrichment camps that are offered beyond what's offered through childcare usually use school sites. And a lot of them you'll find this year during the summer are going to be held at the community centers because we're entering this new world and the schools are still utilizing their facilities and not being able to, you know, share them the same way they did in the past. We're hopeful for fall though. And I think parents are too, because they're going to obviously drop their child off at school and wonder how that child's going to get over to a community center if it's not next door.
So are there any more questions or comments before we want to call for a motion to accept this staff proposed update to the childcare and recreation fees?
I think it would be helpful if there aren't any more questions or inquiries or comments. Before you make a motion just to accept, it might be important for you to let us know of the couple of comments that you raised. What would you like us to bring forward? I heard, you know, we talked a little bit about the Canal garden fee. We talked a little bit about raising those non-resident fees for aquatics. And so I just want to make sure, if there's a couple other items there, and Commissioner Sandoval had mentioned the recommendation you're supporting, whether it's every year or biannually, the city raises its fees, keeps pace. So I just want to make sure, which of those items do you want us to bring forward as your recommendation?
I definitely think we should raise the non-resident fee for the pool. I don't suspect that's going to have a fiscal impact on those families' ability to use the pool, and they'll still do it. And I would think it's probably smart. And yeah, I agree with Commissioner Sandoval that we should be reviewing this more often than every 10 years, annually or every other year. I think that would be my recommendation.
Are there any others, or anybody else agree with those recommendations?
I agree. Those would be the two.
Okay.
Yeah, I had noticed the canal garden thing, but it sounds like everyone that is using the garden, the feedback you got was that they were okay with that nominal fee increase. So otherwise the other two, I agree.
Okay, I agree as well. Do you need us to make a formal motion so that it's sort of more official, Susan, or would that be helpful?
We just wanted, so what we'd like is just a motion to accept for, a motion in a second and then a vote for that. But your comments, I just wanted to make sure it's representative of this group, because then that's how it will be stated as it moves forward, that it was representative. Otherwise, we basically just stack up the feedback, and they don't normally know if there's 10 people who felt that way or just it's one person's comment. So
I agree with the group. I think I said that. Does anyone want to make a motion to accept the report and the update to the fees?
I think my mute is off, so I will make a motion to accept the report with the recommendations of the commission.
I'll second.
All right, Becky, it's your turn for the vote.
I assume we have no public comment, right? You would have told us.
We
Okay.
do not have anyone in the public still, yeah. All right, Commissioner Cabrales,
Yes.
Commissioner Emerson,
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez,
Yes.
and Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I just want to note that Catherine did an amazing job. I think you'll all note that. I do want to plug her a little bit. She was also the project manager that kicked this whole process off for the entire city. So we had a ringer here. She's obviously very strong in her knowledge about this, but the amount of time and effort that she has shown, not only our department, but everybody else in this endeavor, has been outstanding. So I'm just here to, kind of gush about her. So I just want to say thank you to her, and thank you guys for taking this on. This is a meaty item, so we really appreciate your feedback.
Thanks, Susan. I think we're all happy that it's moving forward. I'm sure Catherine is too. Hardworking. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the Measure A work plan. And that's the plan for this year. And I think it was all in the packet. I don't know if staff has a presentation for this particular item as well, or do you just talk about it, or I don't know.
We do, but what I want to do is I want to preface a couple of things. In the last couple of years, Measure A, for a lack of a better term, has sidestepped the commission. And we actually feel pretty bad about that. We're not here to throw anybody under the bus, but unfortunately, Marin County, their sales tax revenues, obviously were coming in slower than what they anticipated. But with COVID, everybody anticipated that the revenues last year were going to be a lot less, which they were, but they waited to announce what those allocations were because it was unpredictable. And that's why it was late last year. Well, the same thing kind of happened this year. They weren't sure what was going to happen, and they knew if they came out too soon, the allocations would be smaller. So we're happy that they waited, because our allocation is much bigger than what we anticipated, but it came much later than it ever has. And Measure A and the city's capital improvement program budget have to go at a certain time. and it was literally a week later. So we got the allocation. We had already had all the different items. The projects already had been weighed in by the commission. So we put it together. I promise you that is not our intent going forward. It's happened to us twice. We do not want to happen. We don't want it to happen 3 times. But I'm going to let Catherine kick off the presentation. We'll chat a little bit about some of the projects if you have questions, and then we'll be glad to give you some input about Measure A going forward, because this is the final year of Measure A. And then we'll talk about that.
All right, so I'm gonna share, you get to listen to me again. I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna, hopefully this is a much shorter presentation than the last one, and we'll go through it pretty quickly. I think a decent amount of this is for those of you who've been on the commission a little while, might be review. But we've got some new commissioners, so this will be new to you, which is great. So Measure A, just for a little bit of background on Measure A, it is it's a sales tax or a retail transaction and use tax that was approved by 2/3 majority of Marin voters in November of 2012. And it imposes a 9-year, 1/4% retail and transaction and use tax, which is administered by the county. The purpose of Measure A is to support the preservation of Marin County parks, open space, preserves, and farmlands. In a normal year, on a kind of normal collection levels, it's estimated to generate approximately $10 million annually. So that $10 million is used to fund 3 different programs. 65% of the funding goes to the county parks and open space program. Of that 65%, 80% is dedicated to protecting and restoring natural resources and maintaining the existing county parks and open space preserves. 20% of that 65% is dedicated to the permanent preservation of land for public open space, community separators, wildlife corridors, green belts, and habitat. 20% of the Measure A allocation goes towards farmland preservation programs. So that protects Marin County farmland that's at risk of subdivision and development and preserves Marin's working farms and ranches. Now, the last 15% is what we're excited about and what we're talking about today, which that is allocated towards cities, towns, and special districts. And that funding is really for managing parks, open space preserves, natural preserves, for recreation programs and vegetation management to produce biodiversity and reduce wildfire risk. So of that 15% that's allocated to towns, cities, and special districts, San Rafael receives 22.91% of the available funds, and this is based on our population size. So in this coming fiscal year 21-22, the city is projected to receive approximately $472,000 in Measure A funds. Now, historically, the city has used this funding to support kind of 4 main areas, which are park maintenance, vegetation removal and management, protection of open space, and park-related capital improvement projects. And it's kind of that last park capital improvement projects that this commission has really looked at. So since 2013, San Rafael overall has received $3,381,223 in Measure A funds, and about $915,505 has been used for kind of more park capital improvement projects. What we're really excited about to announce is that for this coming year, all of the Measure A funding will be used for park improvement projects through Measure C, through the general fund, and through taking some of the services in-house. The city has kind of identified other ways to pay for kind of those other 3 buckets. So that's really exciting and going to give us a lot more funding for some of these big projects that we're looking at. So this slide shows kind of the year by year breakdown of how Measure A funds have been spent on park improvement projects in the past. So kind of on the left, you can see all of the different projects that since the beginning, since 2014, have been used to fund Measure A. You can see over the past couple of years, the funding has gone towards the Picoweed Park field conversion project, and that was to develop the kind of revamp the site plan and budget so that we could apply for that $8.5 million Prop 68 SPP grant. There's also some funding that's been allocated towards the Albert Park Stadium field fencing, which I'm going to talk about more as we talk about this year's work plan, as well as the Sun Valley Playground upgrade, which is another project I'll talk about more later, but is also tied to the city's Prop 68 per capita grant. So that gets us to the Measure A work plan for next year. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got more funding for the capital, kind of park capital projects than traditionally. I know I mentioned earlier that we were going to have about 472,000 in our Measure A allocation this year, but as you'll kind of note from the previous years, the spending on Measure A has been low for the city. And so this year we actually have quite a bit of funding that's also not in addition to our allocation for this year, that's rolling over from previous years, that also is going to get dedicated to kind of these park improvement projects. So to just kind of run through what is in the work plan, we've got $250,000 allocated to the Park and Recreation Master Plan. So I know this is something this group has been really excited about and we're really looking forward to, and we've talked quite a bit about. I think this project's going to be really exciting because it's going to help provide us with a framework for directing city resources towards parks. So as we're doing these, as we're having these conversations, as we move forward about the work plans and what, what projects need funding, this is really going to help us prioritize that in a very kind of inclusive and transparent way. Last year, we did discuss allocating about $200,000 to the Park and Rec Master Plan. Staff recommended increasing that by about $50,000 in order to incorporate a comprehensive ADA assessment of all of our parks and facilities into the master planning process. So we've kind of over the past while realize that there's kind of a lot of deficiencies in terms of ADA and that we really need to have a more strategic plan for looking at that, and tying that with the Park and Rec Master Plan seems like perfect timing. So in addition to that, the work plan includes $50,000 for creating the project scope and budget and design for the replacement of the playground at Sun Valley and to improve the ADA accessibility relating to that project. So this is a project that I know we brought to the commission last year when we were talking about the Prop 68 per capita grant, and that grant requires a match from the city, and that we would be using Measure A funds for that match. And so that this is kind of part of that. We'll be using the Measure A funds to develop the project plan and design, and that those documents will be used to apply for the Prop 68 per capita grant for additional funding. We're also, the work plan includes $200,000 for the Albert Park field fencing project. As I think we've discussed with this group before, if you go and look out at the field, the fence is a little bit, it's got some gaps, one out along out along Anderson Drive, and then as well as over right by the childcare facility. So we have had issues with balls going over and hitting cars. Luckily, I don't think we've had any cause injuries or hit pedestrians or children yet, but it is definitely a big concern. And so just from a safety and liability perspective, this project really rose to the top pretty quickly as needing to be addressed. We're also, the planning includes $100,000 for the creation of a citywide trail master plan. So this is something that's kind of come up recently as a need, that the city does not have a trail master plan. We don't have any kind of strong maps or plans for kind of developing trails or maintaining trails. And so it was actually turned out to be good timing, because the bike and pedestrian master plan is going to be updated next year. And so it was a good timing to also include trails in that bike ped master plan. So we're contributing some Measure A funding, which will be paired with additional funding for the bike ped master plan to kind of develop those together. And then last but not least, where the Measure A work plan includes $50,000 to replace room dividers at Borough and Terra Linda Community Center. These room dividers have been breaking for a long time now, and they really need replacement for the kind of functioning of those buildings, for using them for programming and rentals. It's been a pretty significant challenge. And it's not necessarily a capital project, but it costs enough money that we hadn't been able to incorporate it into just our annual budget process. So we were very glad to be able to allocate some funding from Measure A towards this, because it really affects the functioning of those buildings. All right, so those are kind of what's proposed for this year, for a total of $650,000. As Susan mentioned, that the Measure A expires in April 1st of 2022. We were told this, now this is just changing news, but we were told that it was going to be on the ballot for renewal in June of 2022. But we just recently heard that if there is a recall vote, they may try and get it on the ballot earlier with that. So this is not, well, I guess it's for public consumption since we're at a public meeting, but that is, we have not received confirmation of that. That's just, I think, a potential that's being explored, but we don't know for sure when it's going to be put on the ballot. But we do know that the county doesn't intend to put it up for renewal. One other thing I did want to mention is that we also are predicting to have approximately $325,000 in Measure A funding that is going, even with our $650,000 allocated this year, we predict that we'll have an additional $325,000 that will be rolling over into the next year for kind of, again, for park capital improvement projects. We do predict that the Sun Valley Park project will need additional funding beyond the Prop 68 per capita grant. You know, I think in the next few months, we'll be hopefully getting the more finalized budgets on that, and we can kind of have a better idea of exactly how much that project is going to cost. But we do expect at least a portion of that rollover funding will be needed for Measure A, for the park, for the Sun Valley playground replacement. Okay, so that's my last presentation. Any comments or questions?
I have a question.
I missed anything?
What was on the chopping block? What isn't getting done that you guys hope to get done either in fiscal year 22-23 or maybe not even then? And you don't have to give me a full list. I'm just curious what.
You know, to be honest, I think, and Susan, you can jump in if you have a different kind of perspective on this, but I think because we haven't conducted the Park and Rec master plan yet, at this point, it's hard to know what the next priorities are. We know that there's a lot that needs to be done, but we're not even quite sure what should come next. So to be honest with you, I think there wasn't anything specific that was cut or wasn't funded, but at this point we really need that master plan. to figure out what needs to get funded next. And to
Any
be
other-
honest, we had a lot more money than we were expecting.
Yeah, I have
Which
a
was
question
fun.
about that, because in the memo from the county, it said that it was 900,000 with the expected rollover, but then you're doing 650,000 worth of projects. So I just wanted to understand that difference.
Yeah, so the number of projects that we can take on is not only limited by funding, but also limited by staff capacity. So that additional 325,000 that I was mentioning, that's going to get rolled over to the next year. That will go towards the projects, likely the Sun Valley Park project. I mean, just that the timing of that, we're not going to get to implementation this year. So that's kind of being held over for the implementation for next year. And then any additional funding beyond what that project will take, hopefully by that time, the Park and Rec master planning process might not be complete, but we'll be far enough along that we'll at least have some idea of what project we might want to take on next.
Yeah, I would concur that the majority of that $300,000 balance that's being rolled is actually earmarked for Sun Valley. And so in this year, so it answers kind of two of the questions that were raised. This year, we've done a conceptual design. We're about ready to wrap that up and submit that for the Prop 68 per capita grant. After that, then we go to real design. And that's what that 50 grand is for in this fiscal year. The following year is the construction. And a part of that grant is we have to put aside money, not only the matching amount, but also make sure that we have enough there for ADA improvements. So it was strategic to push that 300,000 into next year and to have it on the books. So when we apply, they realize it's really there and we're not pretending. And so that money will be waiting for us. But Catherine's right. As soon as the Park and Rec master plan wraps up, we're going to have a much better idea of our to-do list. And hopefully it will be prioritized in some fashion that will make the commission's job a lot easier going forward of being able to identify what projects really need to be done first.
So I had another question, which is, what's the sequencing of these plans? So the trail master plan, the bike ped master plan, and the park and rec plan, what's the sequencing? Are they all happening at the same time?
No, they're
I thought
staggered.
the bike plan just got finished. I'm sorry, I might be shorting out. I have bad connection.
You're not shorting out, I might be too. So the Park and Rec master plan, we're about finalizing the scope right now, and we're going to be doing the RFP process by the end of the month. We're going to be posting it. Then we are assuming that we will be able to review the proposals in July, have the interviews of the consultants in August, and then take it to the council for award in September, October-ish. And then in the meantime, we'll be coming to you as well as other commissions and boards and committees to form the steering committee. So that'll be done, they're almost on, they're parallel paths. So once the steering committee is formed and the consultant is selected, we go to the city council and they award the contract, and they also approve the formation of the committee and what it's made up. And then we have a kickoff meeting, and usually it will, to be honest, it will start probably in January. We will probably have about 6 months of meetings that will also include 6 months of steering committee meetings, community workshops, community-wide survey. The active part of that planning process is 6 months. There's some months before it where staff's gathering all the documents, and there's months after it where we're actually creating the draft plan, and they're 200-300 pages long. So it takes a few months of rewrites. But the active part that you'll be a part of and you'll see in the community is about 6 months. So we're expecting, if it goes to council in this September, October, we're expecting it to go back to city council for final approval a year from then. So September of next year. But the plan itself will probably be done, like we'll have an idea of what's in it by June. The trails master plan and the bike ped the bike ped plan, are supposed to be kicked off next fiscal year. So at the tail end, which is actually, it couldn't be better. They both follow the census. They both follow the general plan. I mean, we couldn't have dreamt this up better if we wanted to. So we're really excited that they're all sequencing the way that they are for once. It's amazing.
I've had my questions answered. Is there any other questions from the commissioners that haven't spoken? Commissioner Sandoval or Cabrales, do you have any comments or questions about Measure A?
No questions. Thank you, Catherine. That was a lot of work that went into both of those.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any questions either.
Okay, so do we need to do a motion and approval of this or not? I don't think so. Oh yeah, we do.
We'd like you to accept it if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, can we have a motion to accept?
I'll motion to accept.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Cabrales,
Yes.
Commissioner Emerson,
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez,
Yes.
and Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on to the next item of the agenda, is there any reports or comments from any of the commissioners want to report on anything of interest that they want to share with the group? I will go ahead and say that I'm excited that the county is partnering with the city to partnering in events, and we have mobile vax team at the Dining Under the Lights tonight. So it's really going to be about getting everybody vaccinated, especially reaching out to the 12 to 15 year olds and just getting out there. So we'll be aggressively at these events, and come by and get a vaccine if you haven't already had one, but I hope you already have. So we're excited about that partnership, and things are going well. And I think we're all thinking that June 15th is going to be June 15th, like that it's really going to be lifting all the restrictions. So it'll be a new world for all of us to not wear masks as much. So, but we're excited. I'm still really busy, but that's not your concern. So that's what I have to report from the county. Any other reports from anyone else? Anything they want to share?
We had the final meeting for the recreation and library community center thing that we're working on for the San Rafael Community Center. And I really enjoyed the process. I thought it was really interesting and productive, and made a really a plan that I could really get excited about. So I'm hoping that that will be presented. I guess we were talking about that it will be presented to the city council sometime July or later. So it creates a really nice space in that area. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. I had a meeting in between that one and this one. I already forgot that it happened. It was, I agree, it was a really fascinating process, and I think it's a really great potential site. I'm hopeful.
Okay, so if there's no more comments, is there any more reports from staff? Any staff comments that we want to talk about, or do you want to go over the upcoming meetings and events of interest? I looked at the packet, it didn't look like much. Although I know the Dining Under the Lights is happening probably for the rest of the summer.
Well, I know Catherine's already spoken quite a bit, but I'm going to let her still share with some of the items that are coming forward next month, as well as some possible events, if you can imagine. So I'll let her share that as well. But I do want, it's really interesting that our acting chair Emerson just shared how busy they are. I think we're all probably in a similar situation in that when we were closed, we were busy, but we pivoted to a completely different role. We haven't quite let go of that role yet. And the problem is the faucet is turned way on our normal life already. And so us trying to let go of what we used to, it really reminds me of like you're running a relay race with a baton, but you've got two somehow, and you're trying to let go of one while you're grabbing the other. But all of a sudden in this next month, Catherine and I are already feeling it between all these projects. We've been waiting. And so, now it's hurry up and run, run, run. And so it's going to be great, but it is a lot. So it's a lot to look forward to. And you guys are going to be busier than you've ever been, I have a feeling, as far as the commission is concerned. So I'm going to let Catherine share with you guys what's coming up in our next meeting, and also some of the activities that you can expect to see this summer.
Yeah, so as Susan already kind of alluded to earlier, in the next meeting, we are going to be bringing forward kind of some staff thoughts on our scholarship program, as well as our meeting room kind of waiver program. Those are both things that have kind of been on the list to really look at. And with the fee update, it seemed like the right time to kind of revisit what we're currently doing, and we might be able to make it stronger. So we're going to be bringing some staff ideas to the commission on that and getting your feedback to kind of develop that into revamped policies. We're also hoping to bring, we've been working on an art exhibit policy for the Falkirk Cultural Center, kind of establishing a more clear process and guidelines for folks that want to come and hold an art exhibit at Falkirk. Or our goal is to get it to you in June. One of our staff member who's been really leading that effort has been out on family leave for the past little bit. So we're hoping she's going to be able to get back and write that staff report. It may come in July if we're not able to get the staff report together in time. But we also are excited to announce that it looks like we're going to be holding films or movies in the parks this summer, starting in August. So I think we'll come back to you in June with the specific dates and movies. And I know last year Commissioner Reisinger in particular was thinking it might be an opportunity for commissioners to get out and chat with the community. So, we could also talk to you all about how we might be able to incorporate that. So that's kind of what we've got planned for next meeting. Who knows, there might be something else might pop onto the agenda. Oh, Susan, were we going to also talk about the Park and Rec master plan nominations or kind of appointments at that meeting?
Yeah, I'm hoping what we'll be also coming back to you next month is we're hoping to give you a month off. I know last year you had a lot of months off, and we heard that you wanted to be busy, and then we turned on the faucet on you. So we most likely will be able to give you either a break in July or August. So we'll try to figure out what that looks like and bring that to you next month so you can weigh in and plan about having a free month. But most likely next month we'll also be bringing the opportunity for you to select a commissioner to be appointed to the Park and Rec Master Plan Steering Committee. It's going to be a huge committee. Again, the expectation is probably 6 to 7 meetings.
So that's kind of the plan for our next meeting, just in terms of, and that also kind of captures some of our general division updates. But additionally, I think we've just been getting ready for summer. We are opening up the Hamilton pool. We just started taking reservations for swimming there. Was pretty overwhelmed by the response. So between that and then starting to take rental reservations in July and getting our camps up and running, the camp registration started off slow but picked up, and we're seeing a lot of our camps are full with wait lists. I think, as Commissioner Cabral has noted earlier, we have had to cut down on the number of camps just because we aren't able to offer them at school sites anymore. So our space is a little bit more limited, but we are offering more than we were last year, so that's great. And there's definitely a real need and hunger in the community for those. So that's exciting. And then one other large project I wanted to mention to you, which will probably we'll probably have a little bit more to talk about later on, but we are also going to be starting to implement a new recreation software. So we have had some issues with our current software. We went out for, well, and the contract is ending in December. So we went out for a bid to see what else might be out there. We identified another vendor that we felt like had a really great product. It was going to provide a really great level of service to us. And so starting in June, we're going to be starting to work with them on building out the platform for us and implementing it with the goal of going live with that new platform on November 1st. So that'll be a big change, and hopefully a good change. And I think that's about it. Susan, anything I missed?
No, I think you covered everything. I just personally want to thank our acting chair, Emerson, for filling in tonight and taking the lead. You know, she's obviously well informed and very skilled at running meetings. So we appreciate it, because this was a biggie. So thank you for that.
No problem. I think it was very smooth and nice small group, and I hope everyone's having a nice summer, and look forward to connecting soon, and maybe even in person at some point. I know I'm ready. I'm zoomed out.
I will share this with you, that most likely our meetings will start taking place. We're following the council's lead. What we heard was that their first in-person meetings probably will start in September.
Yeah.
That's what they're
I
aiming.
think, yeah, I think a lot of businesses are adopting that. Wait for the summer before requiring people to get back to in-person work. So we'll see. But yeah, thanks so much. And I think that's it for the meeting. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Catherine, for all your hard work, and Becky for your awesome note-taking and admin skills.
Thank
Appreciate
all.
you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Right.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.